The invoice. The envelope was thick, not handwritten, not emotional, official. My name was printed clearly across the front in bold, sharp ink. No return note, no explanation, just a document inside. I opened it at my kitchen counter, expecting something administrative, maybe leftover paperwork from the house I had moved out of months earlier. Instead, I found a printed invoice. At the top, in capital letters, cost of raising a failure. Below it, line by line, were numbers. Food, 18 years. School supplies. Clothing. Medical bills. Emotional stress. Utilities. Transportation. Each item calculated. Each subtotal precise. At the bottom, a final figure. $347,218.43. Due immediately. I stared at the page for several seconds, waiting for it to feel unreal. Your one click can keep these stories alive. Subscribe, because every voice deserves to be heard. Don't miss out on the journey. Subscribe and let's grow, laugh, and learn together. It didn't. The formatting was clean. The math was correct. Even the fonts looked professional. Cruel, but professional. My mother had always been organized, methodical, exact. This wasn't anger. This was intention. A small sticky note was attached to the last page. You chose your path. Now pay your debt. No greeting, no signature, but I didn't need one. The word failure sat heavier than the number, because the number at least was measurable. Failure was not. I didn't call immediately. I didn't react. Instead, I sat down and read the invoice again, slowly this time. Each category, each calculation, each implied accusation. Food, rent, education, as if childhood had been a loan agreement, as if care had been conditional, as if love had been billed hourly. I felt something shift inside me, not rage, not hurt, but clarity. This wasn't about money. It was about control. Months earlier, I had declined the career path my mother wanted for me. I left the stable corporate role she proudly described to relatives and chose to build something on my own. Smaller at first, uncertain, but mine. To her, that choice equaled irresponsibility. To me, it equaled ownership. The invoice was her way of rewriting the narrative. If I succeeded, it would be despite her. If I struggled, it would justify her. Either way, she positioned herself as creditor. I folded the paper neatly and placed it back inside the envelope. Then I did something she probably didn't expect. I drove across town, not to confront her, not to argue, but to visit someone else. Grandma. She opened the door slowly, leaning on her cane, eyes still sharp despite the years. You look like someone mailed you something foolish, she said before I even stepped inside. I handed her the envelope without explanation. She read every page without interruption. No visible shock. No anger. Just stillness. When she reached the bottom of the invoice, she adjusted her glasses slightly. Then she looked up at me. Did you ask to be born? She asked calmly. No. She nodded once. Then you owe nothing. Simple. Clear. Final. But she wasn't finished. She reached for her phone and made a call I didn't expect. Not loud. Not emotional. Just direct. By the time she hung up, she looked at me with an expression I had seen only a few times in my life, the kind she used when someone had made a serious mistake. What I'm about to do, she said calmly, will make that invoice look very small. I didn't know what she meant yet, but I knew this. My mother had tried to calculate my worth. Grandma was about to recalculate everything, the clause she never mentioned. I didn't fully understand what Grandma meant until the next afternoon. She called and asked me to come by again. Bring that ridiculous invoice with you, she added calmly. When I arrived, there was someone else sitting at her dining table. A lawyer. Not dramatic, Not intimidating, just organized, composed, and holding a folder that looked thicker than the envelope my mother had mailed. Grandma didn't waste time. I updated my estate documents 3 years ago, she said, folding her hands neatly, after I noticed certain patterns. Patterns. The word hung in the air. The lawyer opened the folder and began explaining. Grandma's estate, property, investments, savings, was structured through a trust. Nothing unusual about that. But the distribution terms were specific. Very specific. There's a character clause. The lawyer said professionally, any beneficiary who attempts to financially exploit, intimidate, or coerce another direct family member forfeits their primary inheritance allocation. My stomach tightened slightly. Coerce? I asked quietly. The lawyer nodded. Documented attempts to impose financial liability without legal basis qualify. Grandma looked at me steadily. That invoice, she said, tapping the envelope, is documentation. I didn't feel triumph. I felt gravity, because this wasn't about revenge. This was about consequences. Grandma had anticipated something long before the envelope ever arrived. She had watched family dynamics closely over the years, who used money as leverage, who equated support with control, who treated relationships like transactions. She had seen it clearly, and she had prepared. The lawyer continued, sliding a copy of the relevant clause across the table. The language was firm, but fair. It didn't name anyone. It simply described behavior that had now been recorded. What happens next? I asked. Grandma's voice remained steady. Nothing, unless she continues. There it was. A choice. Not punishment. A boundary. If my mother withdrew the claim, acknowledged the inappropriate demand, and ceased financial intimidation, the trust would remain structured as originally planned. If she didn't, her share would be reassigned, significantly. To whom? The lawyer didn't specify out loud, but the implication was obvious. Later that evening, Grandma made another phone call. This one to my mother. She didn't shout. She didn't argue. She simply explained that the invoice had been reviewed, legally and formally documented. She described the clause. She clarified the consequences. Then she ended the call with one sentence. Parenthood is not a loan agreement. Silence followed. For 2 days, nothing happened. No response. No apology. No escalation. Then, on the third morning, I received a message, not from my mother directly, but from her assistant at the company she worked for. Attached was a short, formal statement. The previously issued document labeled cost of raising a failure is hereby withdrawn. It does not represent a legally binding claim and should be disregarded. No apology, but removal. An hour later, my mother called. Her tone was controlled, but no longer confident. You involve Grandma, she said. I answered calmly. I showed her what you sent. A pause. Then, carefully, you've made this bigger than it needed to be. I didn't argue, because bigger wasn't the right word. Clearer was. You tried to charge me for existing. I said quietly. She didn't respond immediately. For the first time in years, there was no superiority in her voice. Only awareness. I won't pursue it, she said finally. I know, I replied. After the call ended, I sat still for a moment. The invoice had been withdrawn, the threat removed, but something else had shifted permanently, the power dynamic, because this time I hadn't defended myself emotionally. I had responded structurally, and structure lasts longer than anger. That evening, I visited Grandma again. She poured tea calmly, as if none of this had been dramatic. Money, she said, stirring slowly, is useful, but it reveals character faster than anything else. I nodded. She smiled faintly. Now she knows you're not available for purchase or punishment. The invoice had tried to define me as a liability,